I found two games inspired by the Metal Gear series that I want to review. The first is called UnMetal. UnMetal is a spoof on the first two games of the series, Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, but if you played Metal Gear Solid, then it would still feel familiar. You play as Jesse Fox, who is in prison for a crime that he didn't commit. Now he has to unleash his inner snake to escape. However, the story takes place as a narration from Jesse, so we have to rely on his account of what happens. It starts off well by setting the tone and characters' personalities in the first cutscene. Since it's a narration, the tone matches Jesse's attitude, so we get a lot of exaggerated scenarios that add to the game's comedy. A lot of the jokes do land, and if not, it's still entertaining. Of course, when telling jokes, the delivery is just as important, which the voice actors do a good job at, as well as portraying their characters.
He's tall, ripped, and from Texas. Just like me, sir.
Fuck! You're from Texas? Only two things come from Texas. Charcoal and assholes. Which one are you, boy? I don't see any ass smears, but I definitely see a shit stain.
But sir, Texas exports propane accessories.
Shut the fuck up, shit smear!
My only complaints would be how there's a couple of times that you can tell that Jesse's voice actor is straining himself, and the amount of times that fuck is used as if it's a casual word. The comedy is sometimes woven into the gameplay, making for some neat design choices. For example, there's a moment where two guards are telling jokes and you can use the time that they're laughing to sneak by them. Although in this situation, it does feel forced as you can't disrupt them by tossing a coin or making noise, since they make some pseudo-meta commentary on it instead of abiding by typical guard behavior. This would have been better if they kept the player's options open to use whatever they wanted. There are other times where the game sacrifices good gameplay design choices just for a joke. Multiple times throughout the game, the player becomes the punchline by the game screwing them over with no fault of their own, such as saying bless you to a guard that sneezes, which alerts him. It is funny, and there is a red circle that pops up when he is sneezing, but it's not clear what that circle means, and you're punished with potential health loss and losing the experience that you could have gotten from taking out the guard stealthily. It does feel a bit cheap, but at most you'll just have to restart your last save, which the game frequently does for you some of the time. But the instances where the player is the punchline from the protagonist exaggerating his story do work well to add some additional obstacles in silly ways, like piranha-human hybrids. Even the game calls Jesse out on his shenanigans. A perfect example of the player being the punchline in a bad way is some guards tossing a coin. The player can see and immediately know what's going on, but Jesse takes control away from the player to pick it up if you go too close to it. However, you need to get that close to be able to go up and grab some photographs. They are optional, but forcing the player into a situation where they might get killed and have to restart to the last checkpoint, especially on hard, is just cruel. Now, there is a solution to not get baited by the coin, and it's to wear sunglasses. A thing that has had no practical use that is found near the beginning of the game, while this coin trick is almost at the end. It's just odd, and it feels like it's reaching towards but not quite at the absurdity of point-and-click games. There are times in the story where you have to combine items to proceed, which are usually logical, and the items are found in the same area. So the sunglasses example would be better if it was better communicated to the player that this is a viable option, or at least stay consistent in how items are used throughout the game. I also had some issues with the perspective, like I can't tell if the box is blocking the way for the very top or the bottom of the screen until you try. However, this is just innate for this type of view. The issue that is more unique to UnMetal is the corner punch not working well if you're in a position where you can't see the side of the wall that you're hugging. It can lead to screwing up a takedown on a guard, which then triggers an alarm, which is basically game over. You can't hide or run away unless you get lucky due to the swarms of guards that pour in. It's quicker if you just let them kill you and restart at a checkpoint. That tedium is compounded by the near constant amount of interruptions for dialogue. Monologues are included for almost everything, which is fine since this is taking place during an interrogation where our protagonist is recalling the events. Although if you had to restart a section or you're playing through for a second time, then this feels tedious having to skip dialogue every couple of moments, which I recommend turning up the skip speed in the settings to alleviate this. The most egregious example of dialogue interruption happening is in Chapter 5 halfway through the game. There is a patrol that cycles through the area, which there is a monologue to explain what's happening that the player can see. By now, the player knows that bodies will alert guards and they can drag said bodies into a hidden place to avoid triggering that alarm. However, right after the player knocks out the first guard, there is a monologue that explains that we should hide the body because the platoon that patrols the area will see it and trigger an alarm. The monologue makes sense in terms of the interrogation, but is completely unnecessary and jarring in terms of gameplay. It would have been better to cut out redundant information like this that the player already knows. On the opposite end, the player isn't given a lot of context on the choices that they have to make. Some of the times, these choices are used for a comedic effect where the lack of context is needed for the punchline to work, and I will say that these choices do work well. For example, there's a time where you can say that there's a few amount of rats or there's a lot of rats. Saying that there's a lot of rats will lead to a funny sequence. However, when the choices are not really being used for a joke and more so to actually proceed in the game, it can be pretty irritating. And that's due to these type of choices just being trial and error. For this example, there's an option of blowing up or breaking the flamethrower that you've been using. There's a logical correct choice, but with how goofy this game has been so far, it gives the impression that blowing it up is still viable and it may lead to something funny, but it doesn't. It just kills you and forces you to replay the boss fight. Plus, he's narrating his past actions, which gives the player the impression that picking the exploding flamethrower will have Jesse Fox still be alive. Speaking of weapons, you have the basics like a slingshot, pistol, grenades, and some others. It's not very wise to use lethal options on guards though, like the pistol, since if you kill someone then it's a game over. They only die if you don't heal them with one of your medkits, which you're going to need, since they're the only way to regain your health disregarding any secret items, and your health will tick down from almost every attack due to bleeding. You're going to have to bandage yourself or use a medkit to stop any bleeding that you get. It's not a resource management thing since you have unlimited bandages, and they don't heal you, they only stop the bleeding. Medkits can do both, making them valuable, but the whole bleeding after almost every attack is rather annoying. With having an unlimited amount of bandages, the bleed mechanic just feels like filler. It's not like fights last long enough for bleeding to be significant anyway. It would be better to limit bleeding to a smaller pool of attacks, or just remove it. On a more positive note, Chapter 5 the barracks felt like where the gameplay shined, with dealing with a platoon of guards that routinely ran around the area, forcing you to actually hide the bodies of those who you knocked out. You can also use the binoculars to see in another area, sort of like looking through a keyhole to see inside a room in other stealth games. It felt like stealth was the focus point for the chapter. All of the mechanics were coming together from using tools, avoiding guards, and actually having to hide bodies to form a good stealth experience. Yet, that was the game's high. UnMetal starts to feel like it drags towards the end. I would put the blame on the multiple vehicle sections and the tedium of restarting checkpoints and repeating your previous actions throughout the game. They're not necessarily a bad thing, but the vehicle sections aren't that fun. There are multiple gotcha moments where failure is from the lack of seeing into the future, and a boss which requires restarting a lot just to find the right sequence of choices to beat him. All of this combined really wears you down. I did appreciate the King of the Hill joke in the boss fight though. While that fight is optional, there is a required part where you do have to get a sequence of dialogue options correct to proceed into a building. One of the options is about delivering pizza, which you can find in the trash can to the left. This is a red herring. Every dialogue option with or without the pizza will lead to failure. Instead, you have to examine the pizza to see what type it is, then combine it with the fire extinguisher on the right side of the area so that the pizza looks fresh out of the oven. I guess it makes sense, but I don't ever remember seeing pizza smoking like that. If anything, I would assume that it is on fire and burnt. It once again reaches towards but not quite at the level of absurdity of point-and-click games that I don't think meshes well with this game. Not to forget the tedium of having to wait for the cameras to move so you can do what you need to do every time that you have to restart. Also, if your skip speed is high enough, you might end up skipping dialogue when you didn't mean to. This is because you have to hold down the X key to select the option, which is also the same key to skip dialogue. This isn't a unique problem to this specific part of the game, but doing so here won't make it clear that you're picking the wrong option. Honestly, you're going to be here for the dialogue, story, and jokes, and not so much for the gameplay. UnMetal starts off strong but becomes a grind as you progress. I can only recommend playing on medium difficulty or lower. Don't put more grind onto yourself than what's needed if you're going to play. I would only recommend UnMetal for Metal Gear fans and on sale. Next up, we have a game called Undetected. You play as Khan, a special stealth agent that used to work for Simicorp but went rogue because of how they're ruling with an iron fist. Simicorp runs the Mexican-American country and are displacing refugees from the former United States that had to flee because of climate change, and they're also displacing Mexicans as well. I'm assuming that climate change in this world refers to a global freezing to have fleeing towards the equator makes sense. Revolutionaries known as Los Desplazados, which Khan is now a member of, are trying to rein in Simicorp's power, and their current objective is preventing them from controlling an important power plant. The leader of Los Desplazados, Gloria, and other members have gone missing in the power plant, and it's up to you to rescue them. Of course, you can't kill anyone or else it gives Simicorp a reason to persecute them. It's a good setup, and don't you worry, this game includes characters dumping exposition on you whether you like it or not, just like Metal Gear, but luckily it's not as overbearing. However, it does go a step further by placing a lot of the background information needed to get some understanding of the story in the text files on the main menu. So instead of watching a 71-minute long movie, you now get to read a book. Unfortunately, the voice acting isn't that good, but it's one of those things that can be forgiven for an indie game for obvious reasons, although some of them actually do a good job, such as the voice actor for Darius.
Darius, I'm in the jungle near the station.
Perfect. Gloria's tracker stopped transmitting yesterday near that area. She is a fearless warrior, but we're still worried about her and her team.
Podemos crear un mejor mundo si nos aceptamos los unos a los otros, vivir y celebrar nuestras diferencias. No creo que Simicorp esté aquí por accidente. Ellos quieren algo.
Going into the gameplay, it's a bit hard to tell what the guards can actually see, especially with their peripherals. In one scenario, there was a guard that always spotted me from the corner of his eye, even in a dimly lit spot. Later, in a more lit up room, the guard even turned towards me, which he would have saw me in any other circumstance, yet he didn't see me. There was yet another time where a guard turned around to immediately spot me, like he knew I was there despite nothing to give myself away. My guess is that he was turning for his patrol, but his line of sight went ahead of the animation and thus caused him to enter in an alert state and twist around. So obviously the game needs more consistency in what the guards can see. This is made even more convoluted by how you're basically invisible in any type of darkness, unless they bump into you. Being in tall grass functions the same as darkness too. Sound also plays a role, such as stepping on a metal crate or a puddle, both of which is practically a mini alarm, as any guard within earshot will be coming your way. If you do get caught, it's almost a guaranteed game over. Every guard will know your location regardless if you took out the one that spotted you quickly enough and without gunfire. The only times I've gotten out of being spotted is when I was close to the exit, and one special occasion where I remembered the basics of CQC. One time I got spotted, then immediately went back into hiding somehow, so it's very inconsistent in how this works. Because of this, you might as well play on the second hardest difficulty since they kill you in one hit until later in the game if you free enough prisoners, since you'll pretty much be restarting every time you get spotted anyway. The enhanced vision from this difficulty option doesn't seem to change anything. The death sound will induce nostalgia for some of you. I can't help but think of that every time I hear it, so it is a little weird being reminded that a Blade Master is in my base. Overall, the gameplay doesn't really feel that much of an action stealth game. It feels more like a puzzle game with some sort of trial and error to it. It feels a lot more methodical than open-ended when you're trying to sneak around. Sometimes the level is more strict in how to get past guards, other times it's a bit more free, and the level design doesn't really help in this regard since the entire time it's rather straightforward. You can break the methodical nature of the game by using a bunch of sneaky, non-lethal things that you find in the levels, such as a dance hologram, but honestly there's no need for any of the tools or your gun, except to occasionally shoot out a light if that's the only way to get by. But let me give you a little secret. There comes a point where you're not really sneaking around anymore but optimizing how you get through a room as quickly as possible. There's no reason to explore except for maybe batteries for health, since there are no documents for story to collect, and you don't need to really get any of the items except for keycards, and those you'd get along the way anyway. Nothing else matters. You don't need to sneak, you don't need any tools, you don't need to explore. Rolling is all you need. Rolling is the most useful mechanic in this game, to the point where you're playing a Metal Gear Sonic clone. It is the most optimal and best way to play if you're not going for an undetected playthrough. It instantly knocks anyone out, keeps you moving, and has invincible frames. If you have more than one guard to deal with, you can knock them out too. Or there's usually another room with a loading screen nearby that you can escape to. Once you start doing this, it's hard to go back to the more slower, methodical way since now you can be Sonic Snake. You can play the game how you want, of course, but it'll feel more like a puzzle than a stealth game, with the tools acting more like a way to disrupt that puzzle. I guess that you could argue that stealth games are more like glorified puzzles, but at least others have multiple solutions, while Undetected is more limited in its scope, since you're going from one straightforward room into another. Getting back to the story, by reaching the power station, why does the prisoner have a keycard? In fact, multiple times prisoners have keycards. There's a cutscene of some guards talking about a prisoner who won't give up a keycard. It doesn't seem that keycards are like a passcode, so how could they not get the keycard from a prisoner? Is it hidden up the prisoner's ass and he's clenching so hard that they can't get it out? It's the only reasonable explanation that I can think of. He's bounded and blindfolded. This guy can't do anything except clench his asshole. It's just really weird and doesn't make any sense. There are about 3 prisoners who are holding onto keycards too, so these guards really don't know how to make a man open up. Another thing about prisoners is that they are placed in odd spots to the point where if you're looking for immersion, then this breaks it. They're placed in basically anywhere from janitor closets to meditating in a garden. I guess that you can say that these prisoners are displaced. In the same cutscene, there is talk from the guards about new guard models and how it's easier to see in them with the helmet design. So I expected new guards to come in, but nothing ever came. The only new mobile threat were drones. They scurry around and can only detect you, so if there are no guards around, you can just run by. They're like security cameras, but can move. You can shoot them with ease too, so they're not much of a problem. There are some bad game design choices, like how in one spot you can go into 2 different rooms. One of them is just a terminal to turn off a force field, but the other room has multiple seamless rooms connected together with guards, cameras, laser triggers, and drones. So if you pick the room without the terminal first, you'll soon figure out that you made the wrong choice just because of chance. To the game's credit, there are some good design choices, like putting the radio tower on a path that you're on for a different objective, so that you know where to go when that time comes to go to that radio tower. or how laser triggers are introduced by putting it in a way such that players are likely to run into it, but it's in a room with nothing else, so there's no risk of failing anything. The game lasts about 2.5 hours. I can recommend Undetected if the linear puzzle gameplay seems appealing to you, but if you're looking for a Metal Gear clone, then I can't. So if you're not going to play it, let me spoil the rest of the story and the bosses because there are some things that I'd like to talk about. In the beginning, the main objective was to find Gloria and Los Desplazados members that were lost in the power plant. Once you find her, it turns out that she's fine. She's just sneaking about trying to find the rest of her team that were captured, which are the prisoners that we've been freeing so far. So now the objective turns into finding out why Simicorp is here and what Project Cortez is about. We hack into the mainframe and leak the information within it to Darius about Project Cortez. We get some backstory on how there is perpetual energy in the asteroid crater that killed the dinosaurs, which the power station is currently harvesting. This is kept under wraps from letting it get into the wrong hands, ironically enough, despite providing power to a sizable amount of Earth. As soon as Khan mentions Project Cortez to Darius, he says that they're going to use quantum bombs to blow up the perpetual energy station just to put the blame on Los Desplazados and take control of it. So they are willing to expose the perpetual energy source and the infrastructure used to harness it just to take down a peaceful movement group, not to forget the risk of destroying that source of energy. I hope that you can see how silly this is. All of this stemmed from Khan asking what the place he is currently in is, the place that he was assigned to infiltrate for a search and rescue mission. Probably the one thing that he should know to have a successful mission. And how did Darius know immediately that they're going to use quantum bombs? How would a non-violent protest group have access to a quantum bomb? They look like C4 too, and apparently they're really easy to defuse. But before we get there, we face off against our former team. So Khan's former team is mentioned once by Gloria and the lead, but never brought up again. Neither Khan nor his former team members talk to each other, except for the lead. Also, Darius tells us exactly what we need to do to defeat Khan's former team, while giving us exposition on who they are. Shouldn't Khan already know who they are? How does Darius know their weaknesses despite them being a secretive group? Is Darius the true mastermind behind all of this? The first boss or former team member that we go against is called the Nose. He also goes by Jimmy James McCoy. He claims to have a great sense of smell but can't detect us with it, so he's basically just a sniper who is camping and hardscoping. How do we take him out? You can't shoot at him, you can't punch him, and most importantly, you can't roll into him. He'll just troll you by making sure that you become blind and get tinnitus. He's well known as the Nose, right? So maybe stink grenades will cause him to throw up and eventually pass out from dehydration if we keep doing it? Nope, nothing like that. We instead have to use non-lethal explosives to take him out, just like how rubber bullets are non-lethal, am I right? The next boss is called the Mind. It's straightforward, you just open up holes in the floor and throw grenades into it to blow it up. Afterwards, we go against the Body. There's no info about him, but hey, maybe Khan knows he was his former team member. The Body doesn't have any replenishing batteries that you can take to heal yourself, which this is the one that you'll need them on. So it's a bit odd that the other bosses so far have had replenishing batteries, but not this one. You have to bait the boss's rockets into cooling systems, and those rockets are like curveballs that would go around walls to hit you. You could use your hologram, but the Body likes to keep attacking it for a while, so it would take more time to do so. Once the cooling system is down, you just shoot at him. After defeating the Body, we defuse the quantum bombs and continue on. But wait, another challenger approaches and detonates a quantum bomb that we somehow missed because Megamind Darius neglected to tell us of it. Just speculating from seeing how devastating a hydrogen bomb is, I'd imagine that a quantum bomb would do an astronomical amount more destruction to where it might even blow up Earth. Why can't we have regular bombs that make more sense for a facility that has like 2 buildings? The final boss and the leader of the former group, the lead, finally acknowledges you as a former team member, despite that he debriefed his team in the first cutscene that yeah, this guy is the one that we're after and was once one of us. The fight is a basic fist fight, not much to say about it, it's more just like a homage to the first Metal Gear Solid game. The only thing that I have left to add on is that there is only one save slot and no mission select. So if there's a particular section that you like, you're going to have to play through everything else until you reach that point. And that's about it. Thank you for watching. See ya.